Hello, everybody. I thought my panel were going to join me now. Be a good start. So yeah, we're going to delve into business models and the business side of VR. So at the Nordic Web, we actually track investments in the Nordic region, and we're increasingly seeing more and more VR investments. So we know the money is kind of coming in, and investors are backing these companies, but what we're going to figure out here, figure out maybe a little bit ambitious, but at least discuss, is how these companies can make money, or maybe even whether they should care about it. So first of all, I'll do the polite and perhaps lazy thing and get my panel to introduce themselves. Just say your name, where you're from, and kind of what your role is, just so people can understand what vantage point you'll come in during the discussion.
Sure. My name is Phil Chen. I previously started the VR that became the Vibe at HTC. And now I'm full-time at a President's Capital, which is a VR, AR focused fund. So far, we've been the most active VC in VR, AR. We've done 27 investments, including Rish right here. Yeah, and that's me.
My name is Rish Latlakar. I'm a co-founder and chief business development officer of the Rogue Initiative. We're a Hollywood virtual reality content studio. So what we do in one line is we collaborate with established directors and producers in Hollywood, like Brett Leonard, like Michael Bay, like Linda Obst, like Rob Weiss, many others that we have yet announced, to co-create and co-own new intellectual property in virtual reality. And then we take that content, that IP that we co-own, to feature film, to TV, to location-based entertainment, to merchandising, et cetera, opportunistically, globally.
I'm Christina Bechhold. I'm an investor at Samsung's Global Innovation Center based in New York City. We act as a gateway for early stage software and service companies to interact with Samsung throughout their life cycle. Within the investments team, we have a $150 million fund. We do seed to Series B investment and are responsible for all of Samsung's early stage investments in VR, AR, AI, all of those areas.
I'm Hilmar Veur Petersson. I'm the CEO of CCP. We have released a few VR games like Gunjack and E-Valkyrie and are in the process of bringing Project Arena to market next year. Yep, that's me.
My name's Don. I operate an angel group for virtual reality in San Francisco, and we've done 9 investments in virtual reality this year.
Cool. So I kind of hinted at it in my introduction about should we even care. I think we've seen companies like Facebook are an incredible example of we'll figure it out along the way. We'll grow, we'll get users, and we will figure out a business model, and it's worked out pretty well for them. So where we are kind of in VR right now, that's really my question is, we're here to talk about business models for half an hour, but really how much emphasis should VR companies be putting on a business model right now? Is it important to figure it out, or should they just be looking for that mass adoption, be it hardware or software, and then figure it out along the way? Feel free to just jump in at any point.
I think part of the challenge is that there isn't mass adoption of VR yet, and so many of these companies are experimenting with new technologies that can be very expensive to build out, and most of them are using sort of a studio model in addition to whatever the technology is that they're trying to build. So most of the companies I meet with say we're also doing sort of contract work for brands, for those who are looking for content in VR, and that's sort of the bread and butter of how they're financing their business, while they are trying to build something more interesting, more technological, what they think their business will be once VR becomes a market that's large enough for them to be able to do that full time.
I think having been in mobile for almost 10 years, I remember when us HTC, we sort of pioneered the way mobile devices were being sold. And the model then was the PC model, selling through retail stores or direct to consumer. And we were the first to partner with the Oranges of this world and the O2s, and sold through carrier channels, and that's sort of how that model took off. And I do think VR and AR, or VR more specifically, is very, very early. I particularly like sort of the direction in one of the last deals I did at HTC was with the internet cafes in China. And, we have this joke at HTC where, you buy an HTC Valve 800 and then, PC, high-end PC for 1,000, but, you pay 7 figures for the room. And especially in dense cities in Asia, it's very significant. And we do see this trend of the internet cafes, the arcades. And so that might be a space to experiment with and then learning about user engagement.
I wholeheartedly agree with what Phil just said in terms of location-based entertainment, arcades, and I take that further and say IMAX as well. I think there's opportunities to, even though adoption now from individuals is still pretty low, I think that side of the game will increase pretty fast, especially in China. So we're definitely looking at that. The other thing we're doing is really watching the market in terms of our content releases. So we want to kind of be able to time production to get to a spot where there is broader adoption. So we get out there with a product that really fits the market at the time when there's enough headsets. And then thirdly, I'd say we're hedging our bets, not only just looking at kind of creating VR content for other brands or on a work-for-hire basis, but also looking at, as I said, monetizing IP outside of VR. So content that we create in VR, we also make a non-VR version of that content. We also make a content that's ready to go to feature film or TV or more traditional forms of 2D entertainment as well as merchandising. So we're looking at other monetization opportunities that start in VR but aren't completely dependent on VR penetration at this point.
I have a question. So when you talk about, from an entertainment industry perspective, on timing the market for your content, so how do you guys think about that? Like, what is a large enough number of headsets or penetration for like a Hollywood director to be interested in releasing something?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know if we have a set number because it's kind of hard to really pin down a specific number to a specific kind of production that we're doing. It's more of a sense for, I think, platform as well as kind of business model. So as Phil said, IMAX, for example, or an arcade can kind of help us get into a marketplace faster. We might say, hey, you know what? We have something that's very specific for this type of business model. In terms of just broader kind of entertainment timing, I think we're relying on the other tangential product that we have in the market, whether it's a TV show on an SVOD platform or a feature film. So it's kind of a combination of that VR number of headsets out there, and then the other kind of business model / the other experience in the traditional entertainment model. So I think a combination of all those is where we kind of pull the trigger in terms of getting out there.
I want to mention something just to piggy off, which one of the things you were saying is, so one of our companies that we invested, actually Samsung invested as well, is called Baobab Studios. They're sort of like the Pixar for VR, but what's really interesting is, I think 3 days ago, so they launched their first storytelling title called Invasion. And just 3 days ago, they announced that the IP that they created in VR is now being licensed for a feature film. And so I think it's the first time, it's an original IP created in VR and now being, taken by a Hollywood studio to create a feature film. And I find that extremely interesting, how sort of this cycle of creating sort of, if you have core great character IP, you have many different distribution channels beyond VR.
Don, your investment in companies pretty early on, right? So like for you, how important is it that they've already got an understanding of kind of what model they may be looking at? Or do you care about that at such an early stage?
I see a lot of companies that, because the market's so early, I think we all kind of know that we're too early, but that doesn't mean that it's not impossible to overcome. So I see a lot of companies that have set up essentially a third-party department, even if it's a 2-person company or a 3-person company, that essentially does third-party services for people that can actually fund and keep the dinner on those people's plates. And then once they've established credibility and a track record of building content with third-party services, they start to put a portion of their revenue into essentially creating their own proprietary technology. And so I like companies like that because they've already shown that they can create it for other people, and now they're taking that skill and transferring it to create it for themselves. So on the content side, gaming and video, I think that's a great model. Does that answer?
Yeah, yeah. And Hilma, you guys you've invested 30 million into VR, got 25 million back. How did you kind of go about that? Was there a plan to that, or did it kind of just you figured it out as you went along and it kind of worked out, or did you expect to kind of make that back from that initial investment?
So because we started so early, we were developing VR in 2012, and we're studio backers of the Oculus and the Kickstarter and got some of the first kits and all that, and had teams at the company that came organically up with some concepts where we saw, okay, we can create a game out of that without breaking the bank. And then we were kind of thinking launching into kind of a different kind of launch time frame in a different kind of condition. It was going to be a little more scrappy. Then like billions just showed up at the table with Facebook buying Oculus, and then we learned about what Sony was up to, and then we saw, okay, there's a lot more going to happen than we realized. We were thinking of going a much more kind of a scrappy route as we did with Eve. And as Chet was talking about, we know the model of just release and update quite well. We've done that for 2 decades with Eve. So we were initially thinking more like that for Valkyrie. Then when we saw kind of the seriousness, and because of Valkyrie, we got insights into pretty much everyone. Everyone was kind of in the mode, okay, I'm releasing a VR platform, who am I going to call? We're going to call CCP. So we then understood, okay, we have the potential to be kind of the killer app of the early phase. Mm-hmm. So we immediately kind of tried to find ways to share the risk and launch titles on all the different platforms. And then we kind of identified, okay, mobile VR is going to be a thing. And that's when we came up with Gunjack, which we released day and date with Gear VR. And I think it's been the #1 selling title on Gear VR since release, even topping Minecraft, which we thought was pretty magical. And Stephanie will be talking later on about some of the stats and figures for Gunjack. So we, out of that, came up with the kind of position of, okay, we now have the pole position titles. So we now have a unique opportunity to invest maybe more aggressively than we otherwise would be, because we see a way to making sure we're making money as we go along. And I would say that's super important because in many ways it resonates a lot with me what Chet was talking about earlier. We don't really know what's going to work, and the best measure is, are people willing to pay for it? And if they're not willing to pay for it, it's just not working. Oh. It just isn't. There is so much stuff that has happened on PCs and mobiles and things, which is cute and critically acclaimed and awesome, but if nobody pays any money for it, it just doesn't work. And okay, there was a period of time, I think you could gamble with VC money. I think that window is going to close next year pretty drastically, because in 2017, there's nothing left to hope for. Everything is out. Oh. The install bases will be known. People will be writing articles in 2017, like January, it will be 2016, the year VR was still born again. And it's going to be kind of the anti-hype cycle. Oh. But in that period, there will be ways to make money, because there's serious platforms behind this. They will need content. There are install bases where you can also make money. So I would put that on the forefront of everything that you do. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of kind of false target fixation because you're getting some critical acclaim, echo chamber with yourself and innovators, etc. If nobody pays for it, they don't value it. You really have to focus on that.
Totally agree with everything he said, and yeah, that was awesome. Yes, so make money. I think that also the macro environment, like we don't really know what's happening in the macro environment, so I think it's important to pay attention to wherever you're from, that geography, and start to look at the macro environment, and if it's really prospering, then maybe you can take a little more risks, but if it's been hot for 7, 8, 9 years, and there's probably going to be a pullback, then it makes sense to kind of keep that in your head and start to make money on your own instead of relying on investor dollars. So I think that's a great, great point you made.
Cool. A couple of you mentioned a way to make money is almost a consultancy play on the side, essentially. It's how I make money with my company as well, but at the same time, that's admittedly a little bit boring, or not so, that exciting, or that it can also distract you from what you're actually building. So, assuming that's a boring one, are there what are the most interesting models that you guys are seeing right now? I know you touched on arcade, but is there anything else, like in terms of innovative business models that you think could work? I mean, it's pretty much a blank slate, as we've discovered. So what are the most interesting ones you guys have seen?
Just to kind of jump on that. So I was involved in the kind of VRML bubble that existed kind of 96, 7, 8, and 9. And that started with kind of as a consumer play, and we kind of got into that window with Valkyrie and Gunjack, etc. Then kind of it deflated quickly because just having 2T internet was good enough for 2 decades. So the whole 3T internet probably is about to emerge now. But after that, there was quite a prosperous business that company was able to make with kind of B2B, working with big companies, solving concrete problems. Training, for example, was a big thing where people were using kind of even 2T-based VRML to train people in changing motherboards and switches and going into hazardous environments, etc. So I think now in the kind of the gap of disappointment between the hype and the reality, I think there is a lot of opportunity to make money on the fact that there's a lot of Fortune 500 companies with innovation officers, with massive budgets, training departments. I think what Microsoft is doing with HoloLens is super smart, of using their kind of consultancy arm to go to companies, solve concrete problems that save money. So I think there's a lot of scrappy stuff that might be not the most glorious things to do, but you will make money, you will survive the desert walk, you will develop skills, you will develop know-how and brand, and you might emerge out of that with really good assets when the install base kind of get to a point where you can then parlay that into a consumer play. Yeah. Because I think kind of doing what we kind of did, kind of doing the killer app phase, it's hard now because the territory has been staked to some extent. There will be hits, but that's a bit like, it's always a gamble when you're going for the hit strategy, because it's very binary, either you are the hit or not. If you do that with some other people's money, that sounds like a good idea, it just isn't. Losing money is never a good idea. So I think there is a whole unexplored field of really using VR to solve concrete problems that save big companies massive amount of money.
Cool. Anyone else?
To touch on that in a slightly different way in terms of structure, what we've really thought about when we started the Rogue Initiative is we're really kind of bringing together a classical tech company and a Hollywood production business model. And so we kind of structured the company in a core company as well as SPVs for each production that we work on. Therefore, we can bring in capital from partners and other companies, or doing it in a work-for-hire way as well, and avoid dilution on the core company side. So we've been trying to think about ways in which we can kind of survive here until the market picks up, and kind of in terms of business structure, provide investors as well as partners with opportunities to get involved and partner with us. So we're very interested in corporates, in platform companies and hardware companies, companies outside the industry that want to have something created in VR. So in terms of our business structure, we've kind of done that to kind of ameliorate the opportunities to occur and opportunities for us to be involved in.
I take a slightly different position from what Hilmar was saying, because I think the reason in which, I guess, the consumers that you're chasing. So right now, most of the content on the Vive or Oculus is still gaming. And so, what's easy to do is, of course, build a game. But that's if you believe VR is primarily a gaming platform, right? I remember 5-6 years ago when I went to Finland, I learned about sort of the whole mobile gaming ecosystem there. And I think largely it's because of Nokia that Finland became this mobile gaming hotbed, right? Whereas in Silicon Valley, with the Zyngas of this world, they were all focused on Facebook gaming. It was still more web browser based. And of course, that's where they were chasing. But I think the Angry Birds of this world, the Supercells, they were focused on gaming, right? And they didn't see a lot of success in the beginning. Of course, mobile hit, and they rode the wave. And so my position is, we know so little about VR and the medium, the way to storytell, the interaction. And there's so much technology that's still being developed. The eye contact, analyzing, even the computer vision and the hand gestures. There's just so many things to learn and experiment and innovate on. I wouldn't, be so sure to say, this is the business model. And making money right now absolutely doesn't guarantee your future success, in my view.
Cool. So if there is potentially a winter coming, or at least the end of the hype cycle, and several of you believe that investments will dry up, what can companies do to kind of position themselves for that, and kind of what timeline should they be projecting at right now? I mean, we've seen 3 different market size guesses, right? No one knows what that is. So how can a startup kind of project their next couple of years, especially when investments are going to dry up? What sort of timeline should they be looking at? Like playing it 12 months at a time, or looking a bit more into the future and kind of gambling that this will be kind of a mass adoption within 3 years?
I mean, this is true for any market, but I think it isn't so much that there will be no dollars available to companies. It's that there will not be sort of a free-for-all of investment just going into things that haven't proven any hypotheses. And for most virtual reality focused companies, they're at the seed, maybe Series A stage. The key to getting additional investment, and the Goldman Sachs analyst earlier showed that there's a lot of very big companies, a lot of strategics putting a lot of money into this space, is setting out a set of hypotheses that you're testing over the course of the amount of money that you've raised, and proving those hypotheses out, or proving them wrong and showing that you can pivot to get to something that does make sense. There will continue to be plenty of, I think, capital available to those who are able to do that in a succinct, thoughtful way. But that's gonna be different for each company in terms of over what period of time they need to do that. But I think that's more the way to think of it, given all of the unknowns around this market.
There's a guy named Jeff from a small VC fund in Silicon Valley called Boost VC, and he always pushes this philosophy of the cockroach startup, which is basically a VR startup that is comparable to a cockroach in the sense that you can't really kill it. It's just going to be there, and it's going to be as scrappy as possible, and it's going to stick around until it's the right time. So I think it's tough to actually put a number to it or a duration to it, but I think the mindset is like you just have to hang in there, take the punches, stay with it, and then it will eventually come to you, I think.
So just speaking for how we have approached it, and I would very much agree to what you were saying about kind of making money now does not necessarily guarantee future success. We are very kind of focused on, okay, we have early success. The danger there is target fixation, thinking your future success will look like your early success. So we are trying to erase what we think we know because we kind of just hit a certain moment in time. So our future success is most not like our early success. So we had this early entry phase. Then we have the desert phase. And just because we were able to invest 30 and break even, it doesn't really guarantee anything going forward. So we are gearing up for, I would say, 3 to 5 years, even though 1 year has already started. I think 17 is going to be super tough. I think there's maybe hope for 18 because there's kind of Gen 2 stuff coming out, and Ready Player One, the movie by Spielberg, comes out, and that's a kind of another uplifting moment. Maybe the holiday season 2018 VR is a gift, but we're gearing up for a desert walk, being the cockroach in the desert that's going to be able to survive for 5 years. So we have amounted around $50 million just in cash we have in the bank, while still being profitable because of our PC gaming revenue stream. So we want to be the company that's downside protected up to 5 years, uncapped on the upside because of our early success, but gearing up, even if it takes 5 years, we will still not run out of water in the desert walk. So we're maybe an extreme case of how skeptical we are, which is it's a huge dichotomy that we are so skeptical given that we've invested so much already. So I'm very much share your opinion on just like prepare for the worst. Prepare.
Is that an expectation on adoption, monetization ability, or both?
It's adoption and it's retention behavior. So there's an interesting element with VR and what we see, because we have an experience in EVE Online, which is the absolute reverse. So VR is super engaging on the first few days, and then it gets to this weird kind of friction point where it's like, I'm kind of over the sugar rush of it, and now I have to strap everything on and do all these things, and it's almost like going to the gym level of kind of stuff. So there is a retention issue. EVE Online, we're kind of, okay, that's kind of weird. What button should I press and all that? And then once you get it, you stay with the game for decades. So we're trying to figure out, okay, what's going to be the retention play where you're going to go again and again and again. And it's not going to be just because there's a new game and a new game and a new game. People are going to burn out on that. Yeah. We just see that on the PC and mobile. What works on PC and mobile really are highly retentive games you play for years. EVE Online, MMOs on the PC side, of course with some AAA hits. But AAA hits are not going to be a realistic VR play in a low install base environment. So you have to have repeat, retentive, monetize over a period of time kind of experiences in the absence of a huge install base. You also have to kind of understand what people value and what they're willing to pay for, and are there similar behaviors? Is it more mobile? Is it more PC? Is it more console? I mean, we have theories, we have data, we're still figuring that out. So all these things have to come to some degree of understanding before you can start to kind of make some really seriously bold bets where you're going out on a limb. You have to have a lot more data and a lot more understanding before we're to that point. So we are kind of making these little kind of journeys between oasis to oasis, gearing up for 5 years in the desert and maybe sharing the water if somebody runs out of it as we walk through.
Yeah, you know, I'd totally agree with that. I think we conservatively as well are looking at 3 to 5 years, and very hopeful though that price points will come down from what we've seen in being out in China. I spent about 6 weeks there this summer, and met with a lot of hardware companies and platforms, and so that hopefully will kind of bring adoption up in terms of the number of hardware companies that are that are coming out there in the market and want content, and platforms that want content, and that market's going to be the biggest media market in the next 4 years. So we're kind of hoping that kind of shortens some of those timelines. But totally agree on the cockroach theory and usability as well in terms of the technology. So when that gets better, and when those experiences get even better, I think we're going to see user adoption go up, just because you have to have it, and it's cheap.
One advantage I think VR gaming startups have is that they can learn the kind of successes and failures from the just gaming startups that have come before. So we saw Angry Birds, and it was essentially you bought the app, and everyone thought that was the way to do it. But then obviously King and Supercell, free to play, in-app purchases, and actually that turned out to be kind of the winning business model, if you like. So is it as simple as kind of just shifting that onto VR? Does it work to just apply that to go for, if you're a gaming startup, to do those in-app purchases? Because at least from what I've seen, a lot of the kind of VR gaming are kind of just selling the game rather than going for that approach that we've seen work so well in gaming. So is it easily applied, or is there more to it than that?
I think there's probably going to be a bridge between mobile and VR that involves asymmetric gameplay. And I think that'll kind of be one of the earlier models that might emerge on the gaming side of things, on the mobile side of VR. And so how that would look would essentially be 90% of the mobile game, I'm on my mobile device, sitting on the toilet, wherever you're doing it, I don't know. But essentially 90% of the game is not in VR, but there's an added 10% aspect to the game where it is in VR. And so you can go home, and the only way you can access that additional parts of the game is to actually go into your VR headset. An example would be, I spend 90% of my day designing a tower defense game, and basically structuring my format, and then when I go home, I can put my headset on, and now I can basically be in one of the turrets of one of the towers, and I can get that added advantage. So I think that's kind of going to be really interesting, is like, how do people transition from mobile to VR on the mobile side? I know.
Yeah, so when I think about it, I don't want to put this focus so much on the business model. The difference between Angry Birds and Clash of Clans is one is a product and the other one is a service. And the reason why you made a product and that was successful is because the network ability and the cost of network, etc., was so high in the beginning. You had to sell it off as a one-shot. Then, when Clash of Clans comes out, mobile phones are proliferated, network charges are not too high, you can guarantee that people are connected, and then game as a service becomes a model, and then follows monetization after that. But leading with the thought of I want to, starting from a business model, I don't think it's the right thing. You have to start from platform capabilities, kind of where the market is and what consumers are looking for, and then you construct a gap and then a business model around that. Then what we've also learned from Eve, and we keep kind of trying to figure that out, people, they want to decide how they want to pay for the game. Immediately, as soon as EVE Online came out in 2003, EVE Online was already a free-to-play microtransaction game, even though it was built as a subscription game, because macro miners in China were selling assets on eBay, which people used to pay for subscription fee and God knows what. And that was just decision by the player base, how they wanted to play for the game. So often it's always like this focus on the business model puts you down strange ways. So I would focus on the platform capabilities, user behavior, session length, retention profiles, then are you building a product? Are you building a service? Are you building an experience? Are you building something transformational? A book I love to read and reference is called The Experience Economy by Joseph Pine, written in '97. It covers this extremely well for a lot of other industries, very well applied to gaming. So yeah, don't fixate so much on the business model. Fixate on what you're really offering to people. Is it a product? Is it a service? Is it an experience? What are people willing to invest in terms of money and time? Take those parameters, construct something out of that. There, your business model will emerge.
I guess a sort of a short-term way of thinking about it is I think the free-to-play model, if you want to sort of move that from mobile to, and if you're focused on mobile VR, that might be something to experiment with. But at least on the high end, whether it's the Vive or the Oculus, at least the business model is trying to mimic more like the console business, right? And PC gaming, which is more of an a la carte type of business. So I think, then there's a mid-tier. So I think whether it's the low, mid, high, and then you take account, of course, mass distribution with mobile and less distribution with PC and console. I think, those are some frames of, that's how you frame it and think about it. Yeah.
Cool. We have like 2 minutes left, so I thought it'd be fun to just wrap up by giving a quick kind of out of 10 gut feeling. I'm going to run a couple of models past you, like we just talked in-app, whatever, and just kind of mark it out of 10 in terms of what you believe its potential to be or how bullish you are about it. Just think a little conceptually rather than on specifics. But so assuming hardware would be pretty much 10, right? Because it's proven model. So we won't do hardware, but say, yeah, we just talked about it, in-app purchases. Out of 10, how bullish are you? What did you think the potential for that to be a business model is? Just a quick number from everyone, and then we'll rattle off a couple of others.
Well, again, I think of it in tiers. So I don't know how to answer that in terms of mobile VR or high-end VR.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, 5.
Yeah.
Are you going to be all 5s?
If I don't know, that means 5.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm pretty bullish on that stuff. I think, as VR is a platform where people really can engage, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for in-app purchases and e-commerce in general. So, and native advertising is going to be big, and so I'm pretty bullish on it. 7.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with a 9 because I think that e-commerce in particular is going to be a huge space.
I'm going to go with a 5 in the first 2 years and then wrapping up to 10 pretty quickly because it's going to take a while to figure out what people are willing to buy and invest in VR because it's very different to buy something or materialize a need for something in VR over when you're materializing a need for a game on a 2D screen. I have the theory that people are going to be more willing to invest in something they have such immersive closeness to. So they're going to behave more like if you're investing in goods in the real world, even though computer games have taken it pretty far in terms of what are people willing to invest in virtual goods in a computer game. I think over time that will be even higher in VR. But there is a lot of careful experimentation and kind of adoption to go through before we really figure out what it's going to be. And I think once we have figured that out, VR has reached mass adoption, which is probably going to take post 5 years. We are talking about we have replaced the material economy with a virtual one.
10 out of 10 on the mobile side, 10 out of 10 on the desktop side. I don't know when that starts, though. Good point. And I've seen companies out there using the blockchain to create rare digital assets that actually have true inherent value. So I think there will be something that emerges like that where I actually want to buy something that's digital because there is a rarity to it.
Cool. I've got to wrap up, so we just do one quick one. Subscriptions, especially in terms of content media, so Netflix, Spotify, $10 a month, and you get your music, videos, and VR, etc.
8.
Yeah, about the same 8. I think once you want to have that kind of variety of experience without having to pay each time. So I think it works very well in VR too.
I'll go with the 8. I think it's going to be a little while, though, before people are willing to pay subscription fees for content in VR.
Yeah, I've run a subscription game for 15 years. So,
Naysayer.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in optional subscription, where it's not a mandatory thing, but you can subscribe if that's your choice. I think ultimately everything diversifies into kind of a TV, telephony level where it's the customer's choice, how you want to pay for things. Do you want to pay as you go? Do you want to pay subscription? Do you want to have your phone rolled in, out? Do you want to have it unlocked, etc.? So this notion of consumer choice, I focus more on. So, if it's mandatory subscription, I would give it a 3. If it's optional subscription with other things in between, I would give it a 10 because that's the most diversified business model. And it's also kind of a maturity point for an industry when you have fully diversified onto consumer choice. So, and I also think in the world today there are so many things to subscribe to that there is a stack limit in the human mind of around 7 things you're willing to subscribe to, because post that thing you feel like you're subscribing to something you should be using. Am I paying too much? And you just want to cancel them because it doesn't fit in your mind space. So, so this notion of mandatory subscription is going to rub up against Netflix, the gym, this one game, this thing, which people are already subscribing to. So locking it under mandatory, 3, optional, 10.
10, and I'm going to make up a word, in-app subscriptions. So big screen VR, envelop VR, a lot of these platforms, to use a better example, Netflix, you pay $9.99 a month. I would rather pay 99 cents a month to only subscribe to Game of Thrones. So I think in-app subscriptions will be a good way to allow users to kind of select how they want to pay and what they want to pay.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. I think we've actually got some really solid and also tangible advice from the panel. So please thank them, and remember, prepare for the worst.